Let's now look at the last piece of the puzzle, the invoicing portion. We'll look at the generate invoice interface and then what an invoice record looks like. So let's dive in quickly. I'm on the client projects. What I would like to do is to generate an invoice for many or maybe one project in particular. I might be a project manager or an accounting team member. So I will go on the generate invoice interface. From here, there are a couple of options. So first, you can invoice per project or per account. I'll leave it per project for now. I'll select 2 months just to collect as much data as possible because we're in a demo org, obviously. You can search for different billing types. So the billing type we discussed earlier, which are the billing method, will always appear here. We will always recommend to leave all for now because you want to see everything. And the approval status, usually all of your items that you want to be displayed on an invoice should be approved. This way you don't end up with any surprises. But you could also search for not approved items if ever you want to validate or proceed with unapproved lines. So the results are here per project. You've got 3 big columns to look at. So the fixed amount, all of the amounts related to a project billing. So for example, you might set a fixed fee at the beginning of your project, or monthly or recurring amounts that you want to charge your customer. Those would end up here, or maybe even some payment related to a milestone completion. So at a certain time in your project, you want a specific amount to be invoiced. So all of these amounts would end up in this column. The other column will only show you data related to time entry. So your resources are working, they are logging time on a time and expense project. That's very important. And on this time and expense project, this time multiplied by the rate of the resource, or if you're using a rate card, these items will all be considered, and you'll get the amount to be invoiced. The last column is the expense column. So in this column, you'll see any amounts related to expenses that could have been created on a specific project. So as I said, I look at the approved. I'll show you the not approved search. So you'll see the results are different. I have one expense report that has not been approved on the Acme 2 project. I've got 4 hours of not approved, but when I look at approved, this same project, the Acme 2, I have 6 hours of approved time and an expense report of $375 that is approved. So let's just create the invoice. What you need to do is to select one or many, and then you click on create invoice. The system is taking all of the items that were presented here and pull them together and create one record, which is called the invoice. In this case, it created invoice 16. Let's click on this. A lot of information will be presented on an invoice record. When you first create it, you might need to refresh just to see the here we go, the information coming on your new invoice. So what you see now is in the invoice line item section, everything related to your time entry has been brought over. So Roxanne Green entered 6 hours on the task design. Here were here are her timesheet notes, everything she wrote in the note of my timesheet. What was her rate and what's the amount? So you've got a line item that has been created here. The invoice expense item section is going to create one expense item line, invoice expense item line per expense line that was created. So with the detail, you'll see the expense line and the amount as well. Anything related to fixed fee amounts would be created in this section in the same format as you see above. And the invoice additional item is just giving you the possibility to create at the invoice moment. So when you're invoicing, a new line item that you would like to consider that is not a fixed fee, an expense line, or an expense line, or an invoice line item that you just want to add to the invoice. Here, you're going to see the payment. So if you're tracking, maybe you're connected with an accounting system and you're pulling back that information, or you're entering it manually. So you could write the payments that were done on this invoice, all of the files that you would like to add to the invoice. So I'm not talking about the expense related files. We'll see that a bit later on. And the invoice history section, providing you information of what has been done and or when was created that invoice. Those are all the related items. I started with them because we came from the generate invoice tool. Then if I look at the detail of my invoice, standard information, the name, that could all be also set if you want to have a specific name or number, because these are auto numbered. So when you generate a new invoice, it's going to populate with an auto number, and you can set that to answer your need. After that, you got the dates information, payment schedule information, what's the invoice, the total invoice of all these items, including this, whatever has been paid with a balance that would be auto adjusted. The which project is it for, and then you've got information that comes from your organization that is there. We set up the brainstorm box to be the organization from which you are invoicing, because if you remember well, you could have more than one organization in your client instance. In this case, we invoiced from the brainstorm box, so it pulled some default information on the invoice, such as the payment schedule and the sales tax. Also, if you look at the other section, that comes from the organization, but can always be adjusted as per you need if ever you want to. There are some features that are related to accounting systems or integration you might want to use or not. So you could hide or display these fields, or these fields, or even section. So that could be all hidden. Then you've got the financial information, so everything related to labor amount, expense amount, fixed fee amount, so of this record. Very interesting. And this is the invoice formatting section. So I was talking about information that was coming from the organization. I know we covered it very, very briefly, but these are options that will change the behavior of this invoice, or maybe the behavior in creation, the format of your PDF that could be generated on this invoice. So let's look at this now. The invoice formatting is saying that we want to, for example, display an amount column, we want to display a tax column, we want to include the rate on the invoice, to display the timesheet notes or the comments from your resources. So these would all be appear on your PDF, but you could select not to display them. You could include the receipt. So I was talking about the included attachment on my expenses. So I could select to add this, include the notes if ever I have any, the notes and the expense notes, sorry, and then all of the payment information. This comes from the organization. So as you see here, this footer note originates from organization. You can all change that, but I'm going to leave it for now and click on preview PDF. This is generating the PDF from the information we had on the invoice. So as I said, the cycle is really your users are working, your approvers are approving, you generate an invoice, and what you end up with is stuff that has been approved and that should make sense to be sent out to your customer. So information from the organization by default, your logo, your address, and then invoice information that we saw on the invoice record. We had some time related information, so we know that this resource entered this amount of hours at this rate for this total amount. We also add some expenses. So we had another section in which we don't see the detail, but combines the services hour and the expense. So you could hide or display this section depending on the invoice formatting options you're choosing. Add or show or hide the tax, as we saw earlier, and it gives you your amount. You see there are many pages. We're going to look at this. This is the information we saw that could be displayed on your invoice automatically and the footer notes. Here, based on one of the options, I wanted to have a detail of my per resource. So now I got one resource, Roxanne, who entered these amount of hours. So that's one detail I could have on a separate page. Same thing for the expenses. And I also asked for the expense receipt, or the expense receipt to be displayed. In this case, these are logos just for the sake of the demo, but you get the idea. That's a very useful out-of-the-box tool that could be that is provided, included in your client PSA. The other options you see at the top, the first one is related to Xero integration. If you're not using it, we could always hide it. And then the email invoice is an option to invoice to email your invoice to your customer. The get payment from QuickBook is the same as Xero, and we can hide. And the last one is the invoice workspace. So using this tool, you will be able to add maybe some, or create easily some write-offs. So maybe your invoice is already created, but at some point you would like to your customer not to be charged for one of the items that was created from your users, approved by your managers or by your approvers, and that end up on the invoice. But at a certain point you want to have a write-off for that. Instead of going back and forging the hour and playing with the numbers, you remain on the invoice and you select items to be excluded. So either you're gonna say, well, you know what, I had this expense line here that I will not include, so I will write off. This allows me to still display this line or have it on the invoice, and the customer will know that you took this this amount on you, basically, so that you're not charging him for this amount. So it could be very useful. So if I go back and refresh this invoice, you will see that the balance changed because I'm not considering this amount anymore. It has been written off, right? And I could or not decide to include it on the invoice. It would show as a negative amount on my PDF. So there are a lot of options to help you with invoices. Keep in mind that one could maybe decide to use its own its own solution to generate documents that would replace maybe the out-of-the-box PDF, because you have a more custom template that you would like to use. So that's it. That's the invoice portion of client.